I hadn't planned on coming back to Brookridge this summer. Not really. I told myself I'd be working, maybe traveling, doing something productive. Anything but circling back to the small, quiet neighborhood I tried so hard to outgrow. But when my summer internship fell through and my apartment lease ended 2 weeks too early, I packed a duffel, threw it in my back seat, and drove the 2.5 hours home. Coming back felt like rewinding a tape I wasn't sure I wanted to watch again. The streets were the same. The cracks in the sidewalk still formed the same spiderweb patterns. The old community pool was still drained for repairs, and the faded welcome sign at the edge of town still hadn't been repainted. It was like nothing had changed, but I had, or at least I hoped I had. On my second night back, my best friend Tyler texted me, "Party, my place, starts at 7. No excuses." I laughed when I read it. Some things really didn't change. Tyler's house had always been the spot. His backyard was big enough for lawn games, the living room had surround sound speakers, and his mom, Lauren, was the kind of parent who trusted people enough to give them space. She wasn't exactly hands-off, but she let us be who we were, and we respected her for it. I hadn't seen her since high school graduation, though. She'd been at the ceremony. I remembered, standing off to the side, clapping like crazy when Tyler's name was called. When I showed up at 7:30, the driveway was already lined with parked cars, and someone had dragged speakers out onto the porch. Music was bumping, and I could smell burgers on the grill before I even got out of my car. Tyler saw me from across the yard and broke into a grin. "You actually came. Against my better judgment," I said, clapping him on the back. The party was exactly what I expected. Red cups, backyard lights strung across the fence, people laughing too loudly, old classmates asking each other what they were doing with their lives now. It was that strange blend of familiarity and distance, like we'd all aged, but the roles we played hadn't shifted. I wandered inside at some point to grab a drink. The kitchen was cool and dim, a welcome contrast to the humid summer air outside. That's when I saw her, Lauren, standing near the sink, pouring lemonade into a tall glass. She looked almost exactly the same as I remembered. Shoulder-length hair tucked behind one ear, soft denim shirt rolled at the sleeves. No shoes, just painted toes on the kitchen tile. There was a grace to her that never felt like she was trying. She turned and caught my eye, and smiled. "Look who's back in town." I grinned. "Hey, Lauren. Oh, please. I think you've earned the right to call me by my name and not like I'm about to ground you." I chuckled. "Old habits." She handed me the lemonade. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." I didn't expect to be here either, honestly. But I figured, why not? She nodded slowly, her gaze lingering on me for just a second longer than I expected. "Well, it's good to see you." "You too." Someone outside shouted for more drinks, and she excused herself, heading back to the porch. But even after she was gone, I stood in the kitchen for a moment, feeling that look still on my skin. The night stretched on. People played beer pong on the patio table. Someone brought out sparklers. The music dipped and surged. I caught up with old friends, laughed at stories that had been told 100 times before. Tyler eventually disappeared into a hammock with someone, and people started filtering out around midnight. I ended up on the couch, finishing off a drink I didn't even want anymore. The noise had died down. Only a couple of stragglers were left. 2 girls talking softly by the stairs. One guy passed out in a lawn chair. I debated heading out but couldn't quite bring myself to move yet. That's when I noticed her again. Lauren was sitting alone in the armchair by the big front window, a half-full wine glass in her hand. She wasn't looking at me. She was just there, calm, present, watching the night drift by like it had nothing left to prove. I stood. She looked up. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. I shook my head, just waiting for the house to stop spinning. She smiled faintly. "Been there." I hesitated near the kitchen doorway. "Mind if I sit?" She gestured to the couch. "Be my guest." I sat down slowly. The silence in the room was thick, but not uncomfortable. The hum of the fridge, the distant buzz of insects outside, the low jazz still playing through the living room speakers. Something warm and slow. "You always did stay later than everyone else," she said after a while. "Guess I liked the quiet. You and me both." She sipped her wine. I watched the way her fingers curled around the glass stem, the way her eyes flickered when she thought. She looked different than she had hours ago, less like a friend's mom, more like a woman sitting in the stillness of her own life. "I miss this sometimes," she said. "The noise, the people. Tyler filling the house with too much music and not enough deodorant." I laughed. "He hasn't changed much." "No, but he's not home as much anymore. The house gets quiet. Too quiet." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. She looked at me, her gaze gentle but direct. "You seem older." "I hope so. College does that?" I shrugged. "Life does that." She didn't smile, but she didn't look away either. There was a long pause, the kind that feels like something is waiting behind it. "I should probably head out," I said, though I didn't move. "You could stay a bit longer," she said softly. "No rush. It's not like anyone's waiting up." I hesitated, and then I said, "Okay." She stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured the last of the wine into her glass. "You want anything?" "Water's fine." When she came back, she handed me a bottle and sat down again. This time not in the armchair, but on the edge of the couch. Closer. Not close enough to touch, but closer. She took a sip. "I forget how fast time moves until I see someone like you again." "Someone like me?" She smiled. "Someone I remember as a teenager. And now?" I raised an eyebrow. "Now?" She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she looked at the glass in her hands and said, "Some nights I wonder what it would be like to rewind. Not to change things, just to feel something new again. Or maybe something old." The air in the room shifted, not with tension, but with awareness. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. We just sat there, in the quiet, in the dark, in something neither of us could name yet. But it was real, and it was just beginning. We didn't speak for a long time. The wine was gone. The music had stopped. The only sound now was the occasional creak of the floorboards as the house settled around us. Outside, the wind pushed softly against the windows, like it was asking to be let in. Lauren leaned back into the couch, one leg tucked under her, her shoulder angled toward me. She looked comfortable, not like someone playing host, but like someone who had nothing left to prove. And yet, something in her posture felt tight, like she was holding a thought just behind her lips. "I used to love nights like this," she said at last. Her voice was quieter now, more inward. "When Tyler was little and the house would finally go still, I'd sit here, just like this, and let the quiet settle in." "Sounds peaceful," I said. She nodded, but her eyes were far away. It was, but it was also lonely sometimes. The silence feels different when you're not choosing it. I didn't answer. because I understood that more than I wanted to admit. I guess I thought it would get easier, she continued, almost to herself, being alone, learning to enjoy my own company. And I do sometimes, but other times, she trailed off. Her fingers rubbed the edge of the wine glass, even though it was already empty. I shifted slightly in my seat. Other times, she looked at me, her expression soft. Other times it feels like I'm living in a house full of echoes. The way she said it, not bitter, not dramatic, just quietly truthful, made something stir in my chest, a kind of ache. Not for her exactly, but for what she'd given up, or maybe for what she still wanted. I think a lot of people feel that, I said, even when they're not alone. She looked surprised. Do you? I hesitated, then nodded. Sometimes I'm surrounded by people and still feel like I'm not really there, like I'm performing a version of who I'm supposed to be. That's a heavy thing to carry, she murmured. It gets quieter when I'm around people who remember who I used to be, who don't expect me to be anything but myself. Her eyes didn't leave mine. You were always a thoughtful kid, she said softly. But now you're different, calmer, more grounded. I've learned how to listen. She smiled faintly. That's rare. A silence settled between us again, but this time it was full, not of discomfort, but of weight. Like something unsaid was growing roots between us. She leaned her head back and looked at the ceiling. Do you remember when you and Tyler built that ridiculous ramp in the driveway? She asked suddenly. I laughed. For the bikes? Yeah. He broke his toe, and you banned us from using hammers for a month. Because you nailed a 2x4 directly into the siding of the house, she said, chuckling. We were 10, and very committed. She laughed again, but softer this time. You were always the careful one, always watching, even back then. I guess I liked feeling useful. You were. The way she said it made the hair on my arms rise. We sat there for a few more minutes. Her hand was resting on the cushion between us, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her skin. Neither of us moved, but the distance between us wasn't measured in inches anymore. She turned her head slightly. I'm glad you stayed, she said. I didn't want to leave. Her eyes stayed on mine longer this time. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Something had shifted between us, not because of a touch or a word, but because we had seen each other. Really seen. You should get some sleep, she said finally, her voice quieter than before. I'm okay. I know. But still, I stood slowly, not because I wanted to go, but because I understood that this moment wasn't about rushing anything. She stood too. We walked to the front door together. The house felt impossibly still now, the kind of stillness that holds its breath. She opened the door. The night air was cooler than I expected, crisp and damp with dew. I stepped out onto the porch, but paused. She stayed in the doorway, one hand on the frame. Thank you, I said, for tonight. You didn't do anything, she said. I listened. Her eyes softened. Yes, she whispered. You did. I hesitated, then turned to leave. But before I stepped off the porch, I heard her voice again, soft, almost unsure. If you ever want to talk again, or just sit in the quiet, I'm usually here. I looked back at her. I'd like that. She nodded once, then closed the door gently. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the grain of the wood, the glow of the porch light, the imprint of her voice still in the air. And then I walked into the night, feeling like something in me had just cracked open. Not broken, just opened. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching the soft glow of streetlights filter through the blinds of my childhood room. The posters on the walls were the same. The desk still had a dent from where I dropped a textbook senior year. But I didn't feel like the person who had once lived here. I felt like a visitor wearing someone else's skin. And yet, her words kept echoing. You were always the careful one. You listened. I'm glad you stayed. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she looked at me when she said it. Present. Undistracted. As if something real had passed between us in that quiet room, even if we hadn't named it. I must have fallen asleep sometime after 4. When I woke, sunlight was already creeping across the hardwood floor. I rolled over, checked my phone, and blinked at a message I didn't expect. Lauren, if you're bored or feel like being productive, I could use help moving some boxes in the garage. No pressure. No pressure. But every word pressed against something in me that wanted more. I sat up slowly, rubbed a hand through my hair, and typed back before I could second-guess myself. I'm in. What time works? Her reply came a minute later. Lauren, any time after 2. No dress code, but be ready for dust. I smiled at the screen, then caught myself smiling, then got up and pulled on a clean shirt. The hours between then and 2 moved like syrup. I tried reading. I stared at emails I didn't open. I went for a walk around the block just to burn off nervous energy. And when the time came, I grabbed my keys and drove back to the place I'd left just 10 hours earlier. When I pulled into the driveway, the garage door was already open. Lauren stood there in jeans and a pale gray tank top, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. She wore gardening gloves and held a small broom in one hand. You're punctual, she said with a grin. You said there'd be dust, I replied. I wanted to show respect. She laughed, stepping back to let me inside. The garage smelled like cardboard and pine cleaner. Boxes were stacked against the far wall, some labeled in sharp black marker. Books, Zmaz stuff, Tyler's old things. Some of these have been sitting here since before he started high school, she admitted. I kept meaning to clean it out, but life. She nodded. Exactly. We started with the lighter ones. I carried while she swept. Occasionally, we opened one up and paused over the contents. An old yearbook, a half-deflated soccer ball, a photo album. Lauren would smile and shake her head, telling me little stories that spilled out like dust from the seams. You really saved his 3rd-grade diorama? I asked at one point, holding up a shoebox covered in faded plastic dinosaurs. It won an honorable mention at the science fair, she said with mock pride. For effort. For drama, she said, and we both laughed. The work went faster than expected. She moved gracefully, unhurried but efficient, pausing to sip water or wipe her forehead with the hem of her shirt. I tried not to stare, not obviously. At one point, she reached for a box just as I did, and our hands brushed. A quick touch. Nothing intentional. But the warmth of her skin stayed with me long after she pulled away. We finished around 4. The garage looked less like a storage cave and more like a room with space to breathe. I can actually walk in here now, she said, hands on her hips. You've worked magic. I shrugged. Just moved things around. You did most of it. She gave me a look. You're terrible at accepting praise. I like to earn it first. She didn't say anything to that, just gave a small smile and turned toward the house. Come in? She asked over her shoulder. I was going to make some tea. I followed. The kitchen was bright with late afternoon sun, and she opened the window above the sink, letting the breeze in. The house smelled like citrus and dust and something warm I couldn't quite name. Home, maybe. She filled the kettle. I leaned against the counter. "You want peppermint?" she asked. I blinked. "You remember that?" "Some things stick," she said without looking at me. I watched her hands move, the way she reached for the mugs, the soft clink of ceramic. She moved like someone who had done this ritual 100 times. But today it felt different. Like there was a rhythm just beneath it, slow and careful. She handed me the mug and gestured toward the back door. "Porch." I nodded. We stepped outside. The porch was shaded and cool, with 2 wicker chairs and a small table between them. Wind stirred the leaves, and birds called out in the distance like background music. We sat, sipped. The silence settled easily this time. After a while, she said, "You've always had a way of making people feel like they could tell you things." I glanced at her. "What makes you say that?" "You listen, without judgment. That's rare." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just looked out at the trees and nodded. She shifted in her seat. "There were days," she said slowly, "after my divorce when I'd come home and just sit in this chair for hours. No music, no phone, just the wind. It was the only thing that didn't ask anything of me." I looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't wearing makeup. There was a faint smudge of dust on her cheek. A strand of hair had slipped loose from her braid. She had never looked more beautiful. "Do you still feel that way?" I asked. She met my gaze. "Not when you're here." The air between us shifted again. Heavier now, but not burdensome. Just honest. We didn't touch. We didn't move. But something in the way she looked at me said, "I see you, and I want to be seen too." After a while, she stood and stretched. "I should start dinner." I rose too. "I should probably head out." "You could stay," she said quickly, then added, "if you're hungry." I made too much. I hesitated, then nodded. "I'd like that." And just like that, I stayed. Dinner was simple. Roasted vegetables, grilled chicken, and a bowl of rice that smelled faintly of lemon and rosemary. We didn't set the table formally, just grabbed plates from the cupboard and sat at the kitchen island, elbows on the wood, wine in mismatched glasses. She moved around the kitchen with quiet ease, barefoot, humming faintly to a tune that never quite left her lips. I offered to help, and she accepted, guiding me to the fridge, handing me a knife, laughing gently when I cut the carrots too thick. "It's not surgery," she teased. "I'm better with a keyboard than a cutting board." She smiled but didn't look up. The food was good, really good, but it was the conversation that filled me. We talked about nothing and everything. About Tyler's latest apartment disaster. About the neighbor's cat that kept using her flower bed as a litter box. About books she started but never finished. About the way the world felt like it was moving too fast for anyone to really catch up. She asked me what I was doing now. Not just surface-level stuff, but real questions. What did I want? What scared me? What did I hope people would remember about me? No one had asked me that in a long time. And when I answered, she listened. Really listened. Not like someone waiting for their turn to speak, but like someone pulling meaning from between the lines. After we finished, I stood to take the plates. She tried to stop me, but I was already rinsing them, stacking them neatly in the sink. "I see you've graduated to house guest privileges," she said. "Maybe I'm aiming for regular visitor." That made her pause, just slightly, Then she gave a soft smile and turned away to wipe down the counter. When everything was done, we found ourselves back on the porch, this time with a candle lit between us, flickering against the early evening dusk. She pulled a light sweater over her shoulders. I sat in the same chair, feeling the soft buzz of wine and warmth settle beneath my skin. She crossed her legs, tucked her feet beneath her, and looked at me. I used to think that when I turned 40, everything would make sense. And, I asked, I turned 40, and I still felt like I was trying to catch up to myself. I nodded slowly. I think that feeling doesn't come with age, just honesty. She tilted her head. You always speak like someone older than you are. You say that like it's a bad thing. No, she said. It's just unexpected. The candlelight caught in her eyes, made them seem deeper, sadder, or maybe just open. She looked at me for a long time. No smile, no forced ease, just searching. You know, she said softly, there were moments, back when you and Tyler were in high school, when I'd catch you watching me. Not in a teenage boy way, just watching. I felt heat rise in my face. I remember, I said quietly. You never looked away. I didn't want to. Silence. Then, did you ever think something like this would happen? She asked. This? Us sitting here, like this, talking like not strangers. I thought about that. I don't think I knew how to imagine it, I said. Back then you were just untouchable. Not in a bad way. Just someone I looked up to. Someone who had this calm I didn't understand. She exhaled slowly. I wasn't calm. I was just good at pretending. I turned toward her more fully. I don't think you're pretending now. She looked down at her lap. I'm not. A beat. Then she stood slowly, picked up both our empty glasses and carried them inside. I followed. The kitchen was darker now, only the light above the stove still on, casting long shadows across the counter. She set the glasses down and turned. We stood there 2 feet apart, maybe less. And then she said it, the words that shifted the ground beneath us. You've grown up. The same words from the night before. But this time her voice held no distance, no hesitation, just truth. I stepped forward. So did she. We didn't rush. We didn't reach. We just moved slowly, steadily, into the space between what we had been and what we were becoming. Her hand found my arm. Mine brushed her waist. She looked up at me, and her eyes searched mine for permission. I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because whatever this was, it wasn't confusion. It wasn't nostalgia. It was now. And when she leaned in, I met her there. The kiss was soft, careful, but not uncertain. It was the kind of kiss that says, I see you now. I've always seen you, and I'm not looking away. When we pulled apart, she didn't step back. She just rested her forehead against mine, eyes closed, breath steady. This scares me, she whispered. Me too, but neither of us moved, because the fear wasn't stronger than the pull between us. And for the first time in a long time, the night didn't feel empty. Felt like it had just begun. We didn't talk about the kiss the next day. I didn't message her, and she didn't message me. Not because something was wrong, at least I didn't think so. It just felt like both of us needed space to understand what had happened. Or maybe to let it settle into something real before the world had a chance to interrupt it. I spent the day with my mom, helped her clean out the basement, sat through an afternoon of old photo albums, dodged a few subtle questions about why I'd gotten home so late after the party. I smiled, gave vague answers, and changed the subject every time Tyler's name came up. But underneath all of it, she was there, in the back of my mind, just beneath every thought. Lauren. Her laugh. The feel of her hand on my arm. The way her voice had dropped when she said, "You've grown up." By early evening, I gave up pretending to be present. I walked to the small park a few blocks from her street, sat on a bench under a sycamore tree and just stared out across the grass, watching shadows stretch across the playground. I didn't even have to text her, because my phone buzzed. "Lauren, are you out?" Me. "A block from your place. Near the park." "Lauren, wanna come by? I made soup. Nothing fancy." Me. "I'll be there in 5. The house looked different this time. Or maybe it was just me. It wasn't the porch light or the curtains or the faint hum of music through the windows. It was the feeling in my chest. That low, steady pull of knowing something had changed. Of knowing you weren't just visiting anymore. You were returning. She opened the door before I knocked. This time, she didn't step aside right away. She looked at me, not smiling, not guarded, just there, present. "Hey," I said softly. "Hi." She stepped back, and I entered. The house smelled like garlic and something warm simmering on the stove. The lights were dim. Only the kitchen pendant was on. Her sweater sleeves were pushed up, and she had a wooden spoon in one hand. "Hope you like lentils," she said. "I trust your cooking." She smiled at that, but only faintly. We ate at the kitchen island again. Side by side this time, not across. The soup was good, hearty, a little spicy, and we ate slowly, like neither of us was sure what the next part of the evening was supposed to be. Halfway through my second bowl, she set her spoon down and turned toward me. "Can I ask you something? Anything. Does this feel real to you?" I looked at her. "It does," I said. She nodded, biting her lip for a moment. "I keep waiting for guilt to catch up," she admitted. "For the moment when it hits me and I pull away and say this was all a mistake. Is that what this feels like to you?" I asked. "A mistake?" She shook her head. "No, that's what scares me." Her eyes were glassy, but not from sadness. Just full, with emotion, uncertainty, something deeper than either of us had expected. "I'm not good at this," she said. "At letting myself want something." "You don't have to be good at it," I said. "You just have to be honest." She let out a shaky breath. "I think I spent so many years being strong for Tyler, for work, for everyone, that I forgot how to let anyone in. I forgot what it felt like to be seen, not as a mom, not as the one holding everything together, just as me." I didn't speak. I reached out, took her hand gently. "I see you," I said. She stared at our hands for a long time. Then, very softly, "Do you know how long it's been since someone touched me like that? Without needing something? Without expectation." I didn't let go. "You don't scare me," she said. "But this does." "Me too." She laughed once, dry and tired and full of feeling. Then she leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly on my shoulder. We stayed like that for a while, not kissing, not moving, just breathing, connected, alive. When she finally pulled back, there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "I'm tired of pretending I don't feel this," she said. "Whatever it is." I touched her cheek. "Then don't." She looked into my eyes, and for the first time since that night on the porch, there was no hesitation, only choice. "I want you to stay," she whispered, and this time I didn't ask what she meant. I just said, "Okay." We moved into the living room, the lights still low, the couch still warm from earlier. She curled up beside me, knees tucked beneath her, one hand on my chest, her head resting near my collarbone. We didn't speak, didn't touch beyond that, but every inch of air between us was full of trust, of something fragile and real. She looked up at me once and said, "This doesn't feel wrong." And I replied, "Because it isn't." Later, as we sat in the quiet with only the sound of the ceiling fan overhead, she reached for my hand again. Her fingers slid between mine, and I knew without doubt that we had crossed a line. Not a dangerous one, not a reckless one, but the kind you only cross when you're ready to be known. I woke to soft light bleeding in through the curtains. For a second, I didn't remember where I was. The couch was unfamiliar beneath me. The scent in the air, faint lavender and something warm, didn't belong to my room. And then I felt it, a slow breath against my shoulder. Lauren. She was still asleep beside me, one arm draped across my chest, her head nestled just under my chin. Her hair tickled lightly against my jaw, and her body fit against mine like we'd done this before. Like this was something we already knew how to be. I didn't move, didn't want to break the moment. The room was quiet except for the distant hum of the fridge and the steady rhythm of our breathing. Felt like the kind of silence that heals things, the kind that wraps around you and tells you not to rush. Eventually, she stirred, a soft exhale, a shift of her leg, and then her voice, still half asleep. "You stayed." I smiled. "I told you I would." She tilted her head up to look at me. Her eyes were heavy with sleep, her expression unguarded. "I was afraid I dreamed it." "No dream," I whispered. She nodded, her gaze holding mine for a long second. Then she sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "I should make coffee," she said. I watched her rise, watched her pad barefoot into the kitchen, her silhouette soft in the morning light. There was something surreal about it. This domestic moment wrapped in something so delicate, so new, and yet so deeply natural. I sat up, stretched, ran a hand through my hair. My body ached in the best way, not from pain, but from having let go of something heavy the night before. When I joined her in the kitchen, she was pouring water into the machine, her back to me. I stepped behind her, gently placed my hands on her waist. She didn't flinch, just leaned into me, resting her head briefly back against my shoulder. "This feels dangerous," she said softly. "Why?" "Because it feels right." I kissed the top of her head. "That's not dangerous," I said. "That's rare." We sat at the kitchen table with coffee in mismatched mugs and the windows open to the sound of birds and distant lawnmowers. She looked different in the morning, less composed, more human. The way people only look when they've stopped pretending. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. After breakfast, I helped her water the plants. She pointed out which ones were stubborn, which ones needed talking to. She told me about the time Tyler tried to mow the lawn and ran over a sprinkler head. We laughed, and it didn't feel like laughter on top of tension. It felt clean, easy. Around noon, I stood in the doorway with my shoes on, keys in hand. Neither of us wanted to name the moment. Neither of us wanted it to feel like an ending. She stepped closer, hands loose at her sides. "I don't know what this means," she said. "I don't know how to be in this. Not yet." I nodded. "We don't have to know. Not today. I'm scared I'll mess it up." "You won't." "I'm scared you'll leave." I took her hand. "I'm here." She looked at me, that same searching look she'd given me the night of the party. But now it held something new. Not fear, not hesitation, hope. and something else. Peace. She leaned in and kissed me once, softly. Not like a first kiss, not like a goodbye, like something steady, like something beginning. When I stepped outside, the sun was higher now, the day brighter, the world noisier than it had been in days. But I felt grounded, like I'd been carrying a part of myself I didn't know how to name, and now it had a place to rest. I didn't go home right away. I drove around for a while, past the school, past the corner store where we used to sneak candy as kids, past Tyler's house. I didn't think about what I'd say to him. Not yet. This wasn't about hiding. It was about protecting something small and real until it had the roots to survive. That night, she texted me, "Lauren, today felt quiet in a good way. Thank you." Me. "Thank you for letting me stay." A moment passed. Then another message. "Lauren, come by again tomorrow? I'm thinking about making that lemon chicken you liked." I didn't have to think about it. Me. "I'll bring wine." And I meant it, because she wasn't just Tyler's mom anymore. She wasn't a memory or a fantasy or a quiet night I couldn't explain. She was something real, and so was I. And whatever this was between us, it didn't need a label. It just needed time, and presence, and honesty, and I was ready to give all of it. Because that night after the party, I hadn't just stayed late. I'd stayed open. And now I wasn't going anywhere.